Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. So I am sitting down today. It's early for me, but my guests are on the East Coast, and so we're cooperating. But Dave and Ilyssa, welcome. You are the editors of the Campfire Stories, and I'm going to read the subheading, which is Tales from America's National Parks and Trails.
Yes. Thanks
Awesome.
for having us.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is, how did we get here?
Well, it goes back to, I think, 2015, 2016. Dave and I think we're in a little bit of what I at the time was calling a quarter life crisis. I think we, at that point in time, we went to college, we got the jobs, we were kind of just in a little bit of a rut and wanted something different. And at the time, we were exploring the idea of perhaps moving actually to Portland, Oregon. And also kind of kicking around different ideas of how we could maybe travel more or do something different with our careers or our creative practices. Dave is an artist, I'm a designer. So we were kind of looking for something different. And I think also at that point in time, we were getting into camping. We didn't grow up camping or, I played in the outdoors like all day, every day when I was a kid, but as a teenager, as a young adult, we kind of re-embraced that and accidentally ended up in Acadia National Park after there was a trash strike in Toronto, and everything was like the city was shut down. We couldn't do anything, and we just we fell in love with camping in Acadia National Park, even though we did every single thing wrong. We slept on the floor of our tent with no sleeping pads. And we learned very quickly that granite sucks the heat right out of you. So it was a very, very cold camping trip, but we loved it. And so when we were kind of thinking about what we wanted to do, Dave was like, hey, what about that idea you had been kicking around of creating a campfire story collection? And what if we just committed hardcore to doing it? We might have even been hiking in Big Sur or in Olympic at that time. And I thought it was so wild and not typical of Dave to throw out an idea like that. But it happened to be the centennial year coming up of the National Park Service, and looking for some kind of structure for the book, we were like, it would be cool to create a collection of campfire stories around national parks.
Well, that's giving me too much credit, because my first suggestion was we should sell our house, we should live nowhere and just, go RV. This was the, 5 or 6 years before van life really became a thing.
I was going to say you're predating the whole van life thing.
I was a trendsetter, but Ilyssa, when she heard that version of the suggestion, was like, no, let's not do that because we're adults. And that is a terrible idea. So then we put together, but the question was, how are we going to tell these stories about these places all over the country with any authority, with any legitimacy? So I think for the first book, we put together, we did a little Kickstarter project. We raised a few funds just to see, would anybody be interested in this book? And people were. That was the good news. But then we actually had to do it. So we put together a 4-month travel itinerary and just we determined that we need to spend at least 2 weeks in every place to get to know the place in our bones, in our feet, and to meet enough people that live there that can give us kind of a really broad perspective, enough of a baseline for us to choose stories that ultimately tell you about these places. So I think that's what we look for in a campfire story. Not only these are fun stories that you're going to want to hear and you're going to want to share around a campfire, but also this group of stories will tell you something essential that you need to know about each of these parks, either living there or the people that preceded the national park idea, or just what it is like to what's it like to be a ranger there? What's it like to kind of just live just outside the boundary? All of these details. I think the anthology format really allowed us to tell a diverse group of voices and perspectives, and give a reader that broad sense of like, okay, this is the national park in the 2020s.
Okay. So I'm going to pause you because now I have questions to ask about what you just shared with me. First off, congratulations on camping on granite, because that's my experience with camping as well. And so I jokingly say my idea of camping is bad room service. But I have a similar, didn't do it real well. Wasn't a lot of fun. I have rain in my story too. So
yes.
So there's that. But you said something, and you said two words that we normally bleep out on the show jokingly, but you said Portland, Oregon. Sorry. Why were you thinking about moving to Portland? And I could say that sarcastically, like, what's wrong with you? No, but I mean, in all sincerity, why? What was it about Portland that was on the radar?
I feel like we were like delayed in that whole trend of everyone moving to Portland, because I was like a little bit after Portlandia. I think we were drawn to, I think, just generally the Pacific coast, and the access to the outdoors and nature. And Portland felt like a really good spot to access a lot of different natural spaces, while also still an urban area that we could, find jobs and be able to pay a rent or mortgage.
Yeah. Okay. All valid reasons.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I think ultimately just thinking through all the logistics and everything going into that move, it was maybe that the moving was not the fix to what we were experiencing in life as a couple, and it was more just kind of looking for something that would enable us to travel and be in natural wild spaces, but it didn't mean we needed to kind of like uproot our lives and our community and everything that we built. We're in the Philadelphia area to move there.
Yeah, because that's a pretty big jump from Philadelphia to Portland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I've had lots of friends that make that move before us to the West Coast, and they always come back. And there's just something, I think, unique to the culture of the Northeast, and something unique to the culture of Portland, Oregon, that specifically that maybe we kind of saw like we probably would end up back in Philly or somewhere abouts anyway. Mm-hmm. So we just kind of started exploring this opportunity to travel more through our creative work.
Okay. Last question to kind of go back to what you both shared. Prior to the idea of writing a book, had either of you been involved in, sorry folks, Bosley has something to say. Did either of you been involved in writing books before, or what? Because I think there's this romanticized notion of we all have a great book in us. I think that's human nature to think that we have, the next great American novel, or, but what if any skills did you have before getting started?
Well, I have zero writing background, but I am a storyteller by nature in my work. I am a design researcher, so I work with companies, nonprofits, different groups on. Oops, sorry about that. I work with different companies, nonprofits, organizations on developing new ideas or fixing current ones, current products, services, experiences. So I talk to people a lot in my day to day. So I do a lot of interviewing and getting to know people and understanding their needs and their challenges. So in some ways I have sort of like a you could say journalism approach. And so that is kind of like one of the divides that we have in ways that we collaborate well together is I talk to the people, kind of get the good stuff out of them. And I can kind of write with what I learned. And Dave actually has a little bit more of a writing background.
Yeah. I bring the credentials of being the first grade spelling champion. Top of the class at spelling. As I'm of Korean descent, so in Asian culture, we are very much about SAT prep. So I have, hours and hours of just like, what does this word mean? Pick the synonym, all of that training. But when I went to school, I wanted to get an English degree. Unfortunately, my college informed me that I had to pick between visual arts and English. So I went with the visual arts route, but I've always kind of had an interest in writing, especially in a place like Philadelphia. Our art scene it's a non-commercial art scene. So artists are often the curators and also doing all the other tasks that are involved. And I was doing a lot of art writing at the time.
Okay.
So I think when we started putting together this idea that we wanted to write a book, I also looked for more opportunities to work with editors, to write for periodicals. And I just wanted to make sure that we weren't we weren't batting a zero in the writing department. And luckily, the feedback from the editors was that it was good. I needed a little bit of editing, sure, everyone does, but that we weren't so far off. So we did put in the work to make sure that what we were writing was legible, that we were getting those ideas across. But I think it's also important to us that we do have a voice that is broadly accessible. And it's also important that we didn't have to write 300 pages. That's also intimidating to us. We're the editors of this collection. We are seeking out other stories. And certainly I think that's also the way that we lend legitimacy to our storytelling. We're not the experts of Olympic National Park. Instead, we get to talk about our experience. We get to read hundreds of stories in order to kind of pick the final 6 that end up making the collection. And then we lift up all those writers to say that, these are the ones that we've enjoyed the most, and that, read together, we think gives you a really good sense of what this place is.
Oh, okay. Well, first off, kudos to you for not having any quote unquote official skills and still going forward with it. No, I think that's first grade spelling champion. That's kind of hard to beat. But I love it when people, I want to do something and they don't but I'm not qualified, stop them. Now, there are certain things that you probably shouldn't do, like I'm going to do brain surgery and I'm not qualified. Okay. But writing, being creative, taking photographs, painting, even if you don't have skills, you can develop your own style and your own voice. So I love it when people don't necessarily, I love it when you take a risk. So that being said, I do have a question based on this. So how did you, and we're bouncing around a lot, but I think we're setting the framework to talk about the volume 2 book specifically, but how did you get involved with Mountaineers Press? Because Dave, was it when you pitched them, was it, I'm the first grade spelling champion, and they said, great, you're in. But how did you go about getting a publisher for this work?
So when we started, we had dreams, goals, for this to be in stores like REI, LL Bean, all those outdoor organizations. But we were, very aware that we are a bunch of nobodies who have never written anything before. So part of the strategy of doing a Kickstarter, as Dave mentioned earlier, was really getting the word out, and also proving that there was a market and an interest for this book. Because I think as the concept of the book started to formalize, we realized it was a very ambitious project, because we were going to be, getting the rights to dozens of stories, hiring 6 illustrators for that book at that time to create work for the book. So we did the Kickstarter. It was really successful. And one of our backers, actually, James Edward Mills, is a writer, an outdoors writer who writes a lot about diversity in the outdoors. And we were on our research trip for volume 1, and he said, hey, if you're swinging through Wisconsin, I'd love to meet you. and interview you for my podcast, the Joy Trip project. And it was just really wonderful to meet him in person, and he was really, really supportive of our project and our work and the intention of it. And he said, "Hey, I'd love to introduce you to my publisher, Mountaineers Books." And that was really our in. We still had to create a pitch, a proposal for the book. At that point, the book was, mostly the work had been mostly complete. We just kind of had to like pull it together, but the gears were already in motion for artwork. We have an amazing friend and designer, Melissa McFeeters, that was art directing the book. So we kind of like baked her into our pitch, and she's like still our go-to creative person for our sort of our larger brand, the books and the card decks. But so we had all this like cool stuff to show them because we had already gotten so far in the process. We had these illustrations. We could prove that these illustrators had big followings on social media. Like that's really what we were hinging on, was like our reach on social media, the success of the Kickstarter. People want this. We had numbers. We had like actual data. And so I think that I'm guessing is the reason why they were willing to kind of take a chance on us for this project, even though like we didn't come with like a lot of experience or writing behind us. And we had a lot of stories to kind of show and draw from.
Yeah, once again, there you go. Things work out the way they do. You had somebody sponsor you on the Kickstarter. You met them. They introduced you. Doors open for you. That's awesome. But you have to deliver the work. So the first book comes out, and so this is a question I love to ask authors. I don't know what your answer is going to be. This is going to be interesting. So where was the first time you saw the book in a store, and what was that like?
I think the first time we saw it was at a local sort of outdoors store called United by Blue. I think they're now an e-commerce, like online business, but we had an event to celebrate the launch of it and to do a presentation and share pictures and talk about our process. But in Philly, it was sort of like the mecca of like outdoor community and culture. United by Blue does or did a ton of cleanups around the US.
Okay.
And we're sort of like, we were entirely their demographic, like young outdoors folks. And I mean, that to us was like, oh my God, we made it in United by Blue. It was a big deal. But I think like the most like kind of pinch me moments were more our friends who were getting to travel more than we were at that time. Because at that point in time, we had a newborn baby. So when it came out, we were busy and not traveling. We were busy with a child.
Right.
So we were getting texts from people on like Orcas Island, seeing the book on the shelves. I remember a friend sent me a picture of the book at all the like checkout lines at REI. I forget where it was.
Okay.
But yeah, almost experiencing it through other people in other cool places.
That's cool. That's a cool spin on it, because I asked one author, and his answer, and I share this every time I tell it. So, sorry folks, if you heard this one for like the 5th time now, but I was talking to this author, and he writes books about Seattle's like Prohibition era and kind of history of Seattle's like seedy side of during the Prohibition. And I asked him, so where did you, first time you saw your book on the shelf, where did you see it at? And he goes, at Bartell Drugs, which you have no reference, but it's a drugstore. I was thinking he was going to say something like, Barnes and Noble or Third Place Books, which is a big book chain, or not big book chain, but it's a big independent in the Seattle area. But he's at a local drugstore.
Nice.
And I'm like, how did that make you feel? He goes, it was awesome. It was exciting. Yeah. And I'm like, how cool that, you write a book about a topic like Prohibition in Seattle or Campfire Story, and you see it at a drugstore, like that the buyers of the drugstore thought there was enough interest that people going to buy aspirin or whatever would go, I think this book's good to take home with me today. So
I mean, that's how it works. I mean,
Yeah.
I think for the first year was a lot of that for us. It was local bookstores, independent bookstores, shout out to those
Yeah.
that were excited by the idea, loved the design, the cover of our book, and we're happy to represent local authors. But I think it did take a good amount of time to start getting it into retailers. And I think, thanks to Mountaineers Books and taking the chance on us, and like the great connections and relationships that they've built up over the years, eventually it got into the bigger retailers. But it took some time, and whether it's a small independent bookshop or REI, like no matter what, it's like always exciting to us to see it somewhere, because the fact that anyone wanted to put it on their bookshelves is really
cool. So all right, so the volume 1, and then the card decks. What was the story, or what is the story there? Walk me through the high level of the card decks.
So during the pandemic, we got a similar sort of like, well, we could frame it as a creative itch, but probably was just like a little bit of boredom and wanting to keep ourselves busy. But we kind of had this idea of prompting people to tell their own stories around the campfire. And we suddenly found ourselves with a lot of time. I mean, we had 2 young kids, a baby and a toddler at home, but at that time I had to put my business on a hiatus. I couldn't operate it. It was centered on travel and gathering people, which during a pandemic apparently you can't do.
I guess so.
So I had a lot of creative energy that I needed to get out. And so I started exploring this, and I reached out to our publishers, Mountaineers Books. And I was like, hey, I have this idea. Would you entertain it? And they were like, sure, like pull together a proposal. And we went through that whole process. So the first card deck, we thought we would just try out the family storytelling concept. So that one is, prompts for conversation, for telling stories around the campfire. So there's different just like outdoor nature themed prompts that get you to think back on like the coolest thing you found on a trip while traveling. Okay. The strangest thing you experienced in the dark. So all these different prompts for telling stories around the campfire. And then the second one was really inspired by our kids, and especially our daughter, Lula, who loves to tell stories. And well, her version of stories was she would always sing songs nonstop. She would always write songs out loud, and she still does. But the idea of the kids card deck is there are action cards and character cards, and kids draw from each pile and they tell a story about it. So there'll be like an animal creature and something that happens, like accidentally drains the ocean. And there's no specific way to play with it. There's a suggested way, which is you draw one of each. Our kids do like every other version of the card deck. They just keep drawing animals. They keep introducing new things that happen. But it's really meant to sort of like spark a kid's imagination to tell stories.
That's very cool. All right.
And I think the card deck is a brilliant, I guess I can say, because Ilyssa primarily put together the card decks. So I'm speaking from a third person perspective. So when I say it's brilliant, I'm not saying I was so brilliant. I'm saying Ilyssa made this brilliant.
And Melissa McPeters was a big part of it. Melissa and Ilyssa were a power team.
Okay.
I think it addresses the central tension of like the campfire story as an idea, and that like people will pick this up and be like, oh, cool, ghost stories. But we're not telling any ghost stories in these collections. We're wimps and we don't want to hear ghost stories. But also when people have a very specific idea, and we do also want to encourage the sharing of stories. We have a section at the beginning of the book that gives you a few tips about if you were to read these, how, how do you read aloud around a campfire? How do you kind of hold that space? But when we've seen other book projects where they've asked people to submit their own campfire stories, and they'll compile it in a collection, and you get, there are only so many, like me and Ted were walking and we saw a bear. and that's the story. And it's interesting if you know everybody involved, but in a general sense, it's just not that interesting. So I think the card decks are a great way for people to kind of like loosen up and tell their own stories, and the books themselves are a better vehicle for like, okay, this is a more of a curated experience. This is acknowledging history. This is acknowledging I guess, yeah, it allows us to pick the most entertaining ones that are going to be broadly accessible, whereas the card decks allow a group of people to share their own versions of Campfire Stories.
And I think that it was highly influenced by being in quarantine and being stuck in the house and Zooming, FaceTiming with family. People were returning to these like old novel things like puzzles and just like family time. Like there were people who were just like, wow, I haven't talked to my sister, or my brother, or my cousin, or my friend from elementary school like this in so long. Because you just suddenly found yourself with time. And that was like definitely a big driver in trying to be quick about creating something that people could use. Once we were able to like be kind of within 6 feet of people outside, something they could take with them to a campfire and like reconnect with people as well. So it was definitely inspired by the time as well.
Okay. Now volume 2, let's talk about that, because that's kind of how we got introduced, was because of volume 2. So I have a bunch of questions now based on things you've shared. So first question I have is, how soon after volume 1 did you think about doing another volume?
I think I thought about it while we were working on volume 1.
Okay. All right.
Really? We thought it was never possible.
Well,
I guess
he said, think about it.
Think about it.
Not actually pursue it.
So we traveled for 4 months to collect 5 months to collect the stories for volume 1. What we didn't realize was that we had a stowaway. 3 weeks into the trip, we learned that we were pregnant.
I was pregnant.
Well, we supported it too. We were pregnant, but Ilyssa bore the physical. But I was there every step of the way. I didn't bounce.
Cooking from the inside in Zion National Park during a heat wave.
Oh, okay.
But our process was, so we thought we would have to travel and spend time in these places to have the legitimacy to tell these stories.
Right.
But the actual research process was like, we sat down with people for hours. We crisscrossed the park. We were driving for 1, 2, 3 hours at a time often. So we thought, it's like, boy, it was just like, how are we ever going to do that with a kid in tow? It just seemed like it was out of reach, even if we were thinking about, hey, this is a framework that allows us to kind of like make a volume 1 and a volume 2 and just kind of see the project keep going. But it just seemed like the process was now out of reach for us to have that type of travel and to be able to do that same type of, sitting down and interviewing people like this for an hour at a time. Imagine doing it with a cranky toddler behind us.
I have a puppy in here who's,
and that's already tough.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
yeah, I mean, we, once the pandemic happened, and we have a line in the book that's like our lives turned into one big Zoom meeting. Really the opportunities kind of just like flooded our way in terms of just access to people. Suddenly we could reach people. People had just like more time to answer emails, to be, looking around, finding out about projects like this. We realized, hey, we actually could do a volume 2 without the travel part, even though that is so important to us and is exciting to us. But I'll jump back to why I was thinking about it in volume 1, is that from the get-go of this project, capturing diverse perspectives, experiences, voices has always from day one been important to this project. And even with that goal, that value, for volume 1, we were really leaning on existing text in libraries and archives. We went to even like university libraries and listened to recordings. But that, in some cases was just hard to find those diverse experiences and voices, because at some point in time, someone deemed something important or not to save. And well, I think we did the best we could with existing text. It was always in my mind, if we did this project again, like I want to commission writers to write pieces so that we can have more diversity reflected in these stories in this book. So I was thinking of volume two in that way, and in doing it differently. And then, the pandemic hit and it forced us to do the book entirely differently, and was actually a really cool opportunity to commission works from writers that we found interesting or who applied to be a part of the collection.
Give me a walkthrough of that process of applying and commissioning them. How did you go about advertising, if you will, for contributors? And then how did you go about selecting what ultimately became volume 2?
We put out a call for submissions, and you could apply in one of 3 categories. If you had, we have 6 parks that are featured. So if you had a text that was related to either the Everglades, Glacier, Grand Canyon, Joshua Tree, Olympic, or the Appalachian or Pacific Crest Trails, if you had an existing story, we wanted to read it, send it to us. We will consider it for the collection. The second kind of route was like, hey, you don't have a story about these specific places, but you have knowledge, you have some kind of firsthand knowledge, and you as a writer would send a couple writing samples. It's like, this is the general style. And then we would commission something, a new piece in the style about these specific places. The third track that you could apply with was addressing this idea that, like, national parks are great, but they're a little hard to get to. There's an accessibility gap. So we wanted to, part of the fundraising we did for this round was to create a stipend, a grant that would allow people to travel and experience the place. So it was less about like you have firsthand experience, but it's like you have interest, you have the time to carve out in your schedule, and the barrier is a little bit of money. So there were 6 writers. I think, we had 6 places we were focusing on in this book. So we had 6 grants that if we liked your writing samples, that we would pay you to go to these places, have an experience, and then write a new story for the book. And that, that didn't absolve us from doing a lot of our own research, just going out and trying to read as much as we can about these places and trying to figure it out. But it allowed us to kind of fill in this picture. We're looking for, 6 stories that usually the first story in each of these sections is going to kind of give you a lay of the land, a little more historical background, or just like, explain the flora and the fauna, kind of ground you in the place. But, these 6 stories kind of work together to either in style, either in length, and tell you different, Olympic is a place where there are so many different ecosystems that, like, if we already had 2 rainforest stories, we weren't going to pick a third and a fourth. Okay. We kind of need to bounce around. So I think that we want them to be entertaining, we want them to be informative, and we want them together to tell you the story of a place.
Yeah, I think the way that we came up with the themes was different between the 2 volumes. So in the first volume, we were interviewing a lot of people and extracting sort of our takeaways, our themes from that. And we wrote a lot of blog posts about what we were hearing and learning as we went through the process. And then we would kind of like scramble in the last few days or a week of being in a place to try to find stories that captured all of those, or at least most of those, to have the most coverage and, full picture of what a place is. This time around, because we were sort of like story first, we were experiencing place through other people's experiences and stories. Those themes kind of, just came to us through story, which was kind of lucky. It kind of took out one step of the process. But it really just allowed us to work with each writer that we wanted to include on like what they could capture, where we felt like we had some gaps in sort of talking about a place. So it was really like a nice way to get to know a place through story.
Okay. So you said you put out a call. Where did you put the call out?
So one of the priorities of the call for submissions was to like specifically invite people in the BIPOC or LGBTQ plus communities. So we started with a lot of those communities, different like Slack groups, Facebook groups, encouraging writers that we know to share within like their networks. And the process was really, it was open to everybody, and the stories were evaluated for all different groups, but we prioritized those groups as they're often like marginalized in the outdoor industry and space. And then I think it just kind of spread from there. Our publisher helped promote it. Am I missing any other? We did another Kickstarter as well for the second book to help fund those travel stipends. So that was a huge help in just getting people who were like personally invested and connected. We had writers that we had already had as like kind of like anchor writers. We, shared it with those networks to share with their writing communities. We also took a look a lot at the artist in residency programs in the national parks, and found writers through there, but also emailed, some of the people that ran those programs to perhaps share that call for submissions there as well.
Approximately how many people submitted pitches?
I think a little over 300.
Oh, okay. So you had a good reception. There was a lot of reception for this. That's awesome.
Yeah, there were a lot of long nights where we were, and we also we're artists as well, so we know what it's like to put your work out there. So we want to honor that energy, and we spent a lot of time really reading everything, considering everything.
Yeah, and I'll say the most we got out of the call for submissions were our travel grant recipients, so 6 folks from that. I don't really think that we selected many, if any, existing stories. They didn't quite fit within like what our collection is about, like in length and kind of style. But we did find some people whose writing we enjoyed and commissioned them to write the story.
Okay.
But I think it was not what made up the entire book. A lot of it was outreach to writers or people we were aware of and asking them to contribute.
So from start to publication, how long did this process take?
I would say about a year. We had to take a hiatus at one point. My dad had passed away while we were kind of just getting into the groove of taking the call for submissions, writers commissioning stories. They were, I think around that time, they were actually in the parks traveling and writing the stories. It was kind of that moment where we were kind of pulling those themes out, trying to understand place through the stories we were collecting, kind of that heavy editing. But we were really kind of in a moment of grieving. And my aunt had passed away not even a month later from the same disease, Lewy body dementia, which was all kind of shocking and terrible. So we took a break for a while from the process. That was a tough thing to go through while working on something on top of being parents and working full-time jobs. So I think it took longer than it could have. And then from finishing the manuscript to publication, it's typically about a year exactly.
All right. So I'm kind of at a loss here. First off, condolences. So the book has been published. Your work is not done. Now you have to go out and do book tour. And I'm on your website right now. And this is really kind of funny because this ties it all into Washington State. But at the time of recording, this is middle of July. And it looks like you guys are going to be in Jenkinstown, Pennsylvania. where on earth is Jenkinstown, Pennsylvania? I mean,
So
it might be a big community. I have no idea. I've never heard of it. So where is Jenkinstown?
no,
Jenkintown is the proud hometown of one Bradley Cooper. It is just outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And, you know, what we understand, what we're excited to join is a cool little downtown stroll.
it's
Very
isn't it a night market?
A night market.
Yeah.
Oh, even better.
So
Yeah.
it's a neighboring town to where we are now.
Okay.
It's a brand new bookstore that we stumbled into one day and got to know the owner, and decided it'd be fun to do an event. She was happy to carry our book, and we're sneaking in some local stuff before we head out for our big West Coast tour.
So then the question is, have you done any other before recording this episode with me? What other have you been out on tour promoting the book anywhere else yet?
Yes. So in the for volume 1, we went on a couple different book tours. We did events in the Yosemite area. Over a month we were there for a different project I was working on. And then we did some New England events as well, as Acadia National Park is in that volume. For volume 2, we in the spring were just in Grand Canyon, Joshua Tree, and we did some events in and around the parks there.
Okay.
And we've been doing a couple local events. We did an event at REI in Pennsylvania and Barnes and Noble. There's a new Philadelphia Barnes and Noble, new concept Barnes and Noble. That's pretty neat.
Okay. So we're going to put links to this in our show notes, but you're going to go to, have you ever been to Olympia, Washington?
We have. We've been, I mean, not in Olympia, the town, but we've been in the Olympic region before for travel. Yeah.
All right. So you're going to be doing, you're going to be in Olympia. You got one at the REI flagship store. That's kind of cool. Have you ever been to that store before?
I don't think we have actually.
Yeah,
when we were in Seattle, we flew in, we looked around for like a day, but we mostly went out to Mount Hood and the coast and
you flew to Seattle, went to Oregon. I mean, really? You're killing me here. I mean, come on. Yeah, I'm just kidding. So you got the Rainier Club in Seattle. You're in King's Books in Tacoma, which is my old stomping ground.
Cool.
King's is an interesting bookstore. It's cool. It's eclectic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one we talked about before we hit record, which is in my neighborhood, and I don't know where it's at, which is the Wenatchee River Institute in Leavenworth. Who did Mountaineers Press help you book these, or are you booking these?
No, our publisher takes care of that. Shout out to Marissa, who is organizing all of these events. We used to have to organize our own events, but for this we have help, which has been tremendously helpful.
And then you're bouncing up to Bellingham, and there's one here that I'm gonna have to look at the map because I don't know where Harbor Books is. Oh, Hoquiam. Okay, so you're getting closer to the national park, and then you're Lake Quinault Lodge and Lake Crescent Lodge, and you're going to Port Angeles, and then you're in the Glacier Park, and then you're going to Missoula. I mean, it's almost like, do you get like a green room, like a musician? Do you get to tell me only want like red M&Ms in the back in the green room while you're prepping? I mean, what do you hope? Walk me through what would be successful for you and I'm going to randomly scroll my screen and stop on Village Books in Bellingham. You know nothing about that place, I'm going to guess. To you, what would be a successful book event at a bookstore in Bellingham, Washington? And they have a puzzled look on their face, folks. I'm
happy to answer. I'm just nudging Dave to take this one so he can talk. I'm happy to answer, but you want to?
Sure. Let's see. We stroll in, and the red carpet's out for us. We get to go right back to the green room. It's fully stocked. No, I think this is an opportunity for us to to hone how we talk about the book. We'd love for people in that area to come out and just be able to meet us. We'd love to talk about I guess we'd love to, again, we're not we're not Washington natives here. We're not
Right.
coming in with, like, we're not local authors in this sense.
Right.
There are certainly a couple of events where some of the writers, some of the contributors to the book are able to join us. I feel like those are our most successful events where we
So
can
in the
talk a little
Washington,
bit.
let me interrupt you. I'm going to just
Yep,
not
please.
let me. I'm just going to interrupt you. Boom. In your Washington tour, do you know if some of the contributors are going to be with you?
We do. I have
Okay.
yet to update our website with
Okay.
this. And we're in the midst of confirming for the flyers that we are creating. But we have Harvest Moon coming out to, I think she emailed us last night, and there were like 5 events she's coming out to.
wow.
It was, she said she flipped a coin between a paddle or coming to events, and coming to our events one. So
Good.
she's joining us for, I think, all of the ones in and near the park,
Okay.
like the different lodges. We have Rosette Royale, who's joining us for the Seattle REI flagship location. Who else? We definitely have, I think, Allie Donaldson, aka Tagoy, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, will be in Leavenworth with us. I think
Leavenworth.
Leavenworth.
I'm going to
Oh
help you.
gosh. See,
I'm
I
gonna-
thought I got it right
No,
this time because
and
I was already
I'm totally
corrected
giving you a
this
hard
week.
time, so do not.
Leavenworth.
What's
Joining
really
us in
fun?
Leavenworth.
What's really fun here, and I think I might have told you this when we talked on the phone, is when we get a new newscast on TV, new anchor person or new weather person, and they have to, and I'm firmly believe that all the TV stations do this on purpose, is they just let the person go up there and stumble, and and then they laugh at them. There are so many words in Washington State that are of Indian background, tribal background, and all that they're next to impossible to pronounce, even if you know and you've lived here your entire life. But it's Leavenworth.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Thank you for correcting me.
I know, I'm publicly too.
And then we have in Glacier, we have some folks joining us there as well.
Okay.
And then Rena Priest, the former Washington state poet laureate, will be joining us. So I feel like those are the events I'm most excited for. Like we're happy to talk about the book, but we're also here to learn. So we'd love to listen to the contributors read their stories aloud for the first time. We'll be hearing it.
Oh, that's cool. So the contributors can be able to read their pieces. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, that's really cool.
We'd love to get we love people coming out and just teaching us a little bit about Olympic. And we are happy to share from our perspective, understanding kind of like parks on a national scale and what we're seeing, what we're experiencing. We had I think that's what I'm most looking forward to are the events where we have our special guests, our writers coming out. We did an event in Flagstaff, Arizona, as our Grand Canyon event. And we had a writer, Melissa Bowman, come out and read her piece. And it was like, for the first time, it just occurred to me, like, hearing it from the writer being just like this whole other experience. We had read her piece so many times through the selection and editing process, but it just hit in a whole different way hearing it come out of her mouth and how it wasn't intended to be shared orally. So I just love that, and I'm really looking forward to it. Okay. I think to your note about the green room and Dave's the red carpet, I feel like that is the perception of what a book tour looks like. But please keep in mind, we're traveling with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and we're 100% reliant on iPads, and then our 6-year-old pretending to babysit our 3-year-old during an event, but then she'll completely abandon her as soon as someone's clapping for us or introducing us. She just makes a beeline towards us and wants to stand in front of a crowd and take all the applause and attention. And then it's where's Isla? Where's the child? So it's certainly not as glamorous as it sounds, but nonetheless very exciting. I guess add to the list of successful. No injuries.
No injuries.
All of us that come into the event leave the event.
Right. I've talked to a lot of musicians, and the whole glamour of the road means, yeah, there's 5 of us in a van with our gear, sleeping, sitting up, willing to kill somebody to get a shower,
I don't know if we'll be quite
I don't think
there, but there's no one to make you feel like more kind of like ashamed than a 6-year-old. Like, why is nobody at your event? Why is nobody coming?
the complete lack of filter is just, yes, lovely.
Yeah, I think in her mind, she has like the movie star view of like having a concert or whatever.
Right.
And she like on paper thinks we're like a celebrity, but in reality, she's a bit disappointed with the turnout to book events. But as we have learned and have been told that it's really like a big part of it is less so the amount of like people that come, but more the relationships that you're making with the bookstores that are carrying the book and the connections that you make. And like, even when the turnout is small, the people that are coming are like really, really invested and really interested in the book. So that's always exciting to get to know people and get to talk about that.
Right, because they can be your biggest advocate at the local level, saying, we've all been met by people. Have you seen this book? You've got to read this book. And they're like, and as an author, you're hoping that they're handing copies of your book to people, but they're telling everybody, you got to listen to this, you got to read this, you got to go watch that. Those people that are so vitally important to the boots on the ground, the grassroots level of promotion. You can't be everywhere. You can't do everything.
And a big part is like getting the word out too. So we, often find that we have more people turn up when someone has, shared something about it. So we definitely have a lot of interviews like this and others on TV and newspaper, all that are helping us to promote these events. So hopefully some of you will hear about those elsewhere as well and come out to an event.
Okay, so this is the part of the show that this is going to be interesting, because I ask questions about where my guests live, and my guests almost always live in Washington State or from Washington State. And so I can ask them to go back and, to their past when they lived there. But you guys we're going to have to break the rules here. So, and here's the fun part. You can make up stuff and I won't be able to fact check you. So it's awesome.
Okay.
All right. So one of the questions I always ask my guests is, where's a great place to grab lunch around you? So do you live in, if I were to come out to see you, I would fly into Philadelphia. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just use Philadelphia as your home, the base of operations, even if it's, somewhere else. Where's a great place in Philadelphia for me to get lunch? I just got off a cross-country flight. I'm hungry. It's lunchtime. I'm in Philadelphia.
I bet. I bet. Well, I'll give the tourist answer. I bet you're going to want a cheesesteak right away. And that's like saying I'm coming to Seattle and I want coffee, which is true. But you're right. That's you gotta try it. You can't leave without it.
Right, exactly.
We're going to steer you to Cosme's Deli. Don't jump in line at Pat's and Gino's, right? The epicenter.
Right.
Go to Cosme's, a deli around the corner, and they have the best cheesesteaks.
Okay.
That's one option, but Ilyssa has a second option.
I would send you to the Dutch in South Philly, in Passyunk Square. Mm-hmm. It is a tiny little, I was going to say a brunchette, but in the past year they offer dinner service now, which is also very good. But they have like the best breakfast, lunch food. I'm assuming it is like Dutch inspired, Pennsylvania Dutch. Mm-hmm. But it's just really solid food with like great atmosphere and just really great experience.
Now, as usual, I'm going to tell you to listen to Ilyssa. Yes. That was the better answer.
Okay. Now, I'm kidding, but Philadelphia is known for its coffee culture. I don't know. I know nothing about Philadelphia. Is Philadelphia a coffee town?
There are a lot of coffee shops, coffee snobs. I don't know that it is quite as much as it is in Seattle, though. I
Well,
don't
yeah, but
know.
Seattle's kind of the epicenter of the
We're
whole.
I would say we're like a foodie mecca right
Okay.
now. There are a lot of like really amazing, like James Beard Award winning chefs right now
Okay.
in Philly.
But I want coffee.
Yeah.
Where would you tell me to go for coffee? And I like, just so you know, I'm just kind of like, I'm simple. I like black coffee. I don't need all the fancy foo-foo stuff. I like just good coffee.
I would send you to La Colombe, which maybe you're familiar with because I think they have more of like a geographic spread than they once had, but it is just really good. We might be more basic coffee drinkers also, because there's way more hip coffee shops around Philly now, and yet I still prefer La Colombe. It's I'm thinking specifically of the Fishtown La Colombe. That's probably like, I think it is their literal HQ. They have some offices in the upstairs.
Okay.
But it's just like really wonderful ambiance. The coffee itself is like rich and dark. I do add a half and half in sugar to my coffee. I know. But it is just really, really good coffee. I don't like this new like hip bean variety or roasting technique that's like, it tastes like people put like Jolly Ranchers in it. It's got this like sour berry flavor. You're laughing. But it's like, that's what it tastes like to me. And I don't like it. And that's a lot of the really hip coffee shops in Philly have that type of coffee. And I've got to figure out a way to ask, like, is your coffee this version of coffee? If so, no thanks. But yeah, the La Colombe and Fishtown is really great. I remember like when every coffee shop in the city like offered Wi-Fi so that people would come like work and spend money there, they like refused. And I always just saw it as like this gesture to like, no, like don't work, just like sit, have a conversation, enjoy your coffee, have a nice time. And I've always appreciated that.
So you and I could be coffee friends because that was maybe the best description I've ever heard of what is probably, you know, the third wave of coffee is kind of what it is. And it's the I'm not a fan. And so that was awesome. Jolly Rancher. That was, I'm going to reuse that one. That was okay. So I found good coffee, not the whiny stuff. Great. And we've got lunch covered. Awesome. All right. So one last specific question, bouncing back to the book or the brand, if you will. Do you have anything on the horizon that you're willing to disclose? And I'm nudging you towards, is there going to be a volume 3, or will be a new deck of cards, or what do you think might be coming next, if anything?
I think that volume 3 is definitely on the table. We don't have anything official. We've not written anything to our publisher about it.
So you're not burned out. In other words, if
no way.
You're willing to entertain the idea of a continuation. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that we've learned some things doing the book 2 entirely different ways. And I think the next version will be all the more better for, you know, creating almost like a blended approach, like a hybrid approach to what we did. Because I think both experiences really offered something unique and special. And I think we're kind of refining our process, iterating our process as we go. And yeah, the collection is really like intended to continue to grow. At one point, we're probably going to run out of like the big name iconic parks. So it'll be interesting to figure out, you know, what happens with maybe volume 4 if we got that far.
I would offer you that I think many of the parks you could go and do more stories. That some of the parks are deep enough, if you will, that there's more,
absolutely
more stories that in more voices that could be heard.
Yeah, and we've started to kind of explore, even back before volume 2, we explored different approaches like on specific themes like water, for instance, parks where that's like a really important And it didn't quite work out that we took that approach, but I think we could get creative in that way as well. We're also like in initial conversations, planning conversations about a children's book that we hope to work with Melissa McFeeters on as well to continue her amazing illustration and design work. So that one is again kind of like more of like a side project of mine within the Campfire Stories.
Okay,
brand.
That's awesome. All right, I have two questions for you. Last one though. Well, second last. What didn't I ask you that I should have? What didn't we touch on that we should have touched on?
All I can think of is us asking you for Seattle recommendations or Washington recommendations.
Okay. Well, we'll get right back to that
offline. Okay.
I'll even answer them online. But we'll get back. But I can't wait any longer for this last question. This requires individual answers. There is no escaping this question. So you each have your own opinion. All right. Very important question. Cake or pie, and why? Dave, you go first.
Cake or pie, and why?
I can jump in while he's thinking.
Well, I have an answer. I acknowledge and recognize the pie division that you can have sweet and savory. There's more variety in the type of pie that you make. I'm a fan of dessert. My parents always told me that mosquitoes are attracted to me because I eat so many sweets and I have sweet blood, and that's why I get bit so much. But so even though pie is probably a deeper and more diverse body of food, I'm always going to go for the cake, especially if it's a cheesecake. Any variety of cheesecake, I am going to jump into.
So if I had to push you, you could only have one type of cheesecake. What would it be?
Oh, I think just a classic New York cheesecake with a strawberry on top.
Okay. Solid, super solid.
Alyssa? Or the one I had
not the mystery strawberry gel on top.
Oh, definitely the mystery strawberry gel. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you been to like New York or like a Northeast diner where they have plain cheesecake with strawberry on top? There's usually like a strawberry like goo on top.
Yes.
Red goo.
So okay, all right, okay. How about you, Melissa?
I am 100% on team cake. I cannot stand cooked fruit. It is too sweet.
Okay.
So I feel like most pies, unless it's like a chocolate peanut butter pie, then I'm going full swing to the pie team.
Okay.
But cake tends to be a little bit more savory, a little less sticky sweet. And I would go with cake. Okay.
All right. Now to answer your questions, for coffee, I'm just going to answer coffee questions. When you're in Seattle and you're going to be at the REI flagship, it's worth, in my opinion, I can't believe I'm saying this publicly, but I'm going to, because you're touristy, you should experience the Starbucks roastery. It is imagine if Walt Disney and insert name of casino owner got together and created a coffee place, because it is over the top. It is like Vegas meets Disneyland, but for coffee. It is not a cheap experience. Yeah, you will feel your wallet being literally pulled out of your pocket as you walk through the doors. I paid, I think, $15 for a coffee there.
Wow.
No, but it was the best. I go so far as to say it certainly was the best coffee I've ever had in my life, and it may be the best thing I've ever tried in my life. It was iced coffee, and it was whiskey aged Guatemalan coffee that was served iced with it was magnificent. It was absolutely magnificent. Starbucks roastery, you should experience that. Just like you should go to Disneyland, right? You should go to Vegas and walk through a casino, even if you're not a gambler. Go,
we did do that.
They're like amazing, right? And at the same time, they're awful. That's the same thing that the Starbucks Roastery is, only it's all about coffee. Okay. In Bellingham, of course, you don't like whiny coffee.
Like, are you saying like whiny, like a bottle of wine, or like whiny,
the berry
like
flavors?
whiny?
It's whiny, like it's they're lighter roasts. They're trying to bring out all the
sour berry
vibe. And whiny. A lot of African coffees have a whiny, blueberry, fruity palate to them, and that's not my thing. But there's a place in Bellingham that's one of the best coffee shops in the world, and it's named Camber. I've been there once. That's enough for me. It was a neat experience. And my favorite coffee shop in Bellingham closed, so I can't recommend that. But I've heard, I want to say the Woods is one that I haven't tried that, but there's one in Bellingham, and I've not been to this one, and it is called Narrative Coffee. And Narrative brings in coffees from other roasters. They kind of rotate them through, like your local tavern has rotating taps. These guys have rotating coffee roasters come through. They do a great job with coffee.
That. Yeah,
it's a great thing. In Tacoma, you can go anywhere. You can't go wrong for coffee in Tacoma. In Olympia, try Olympia Coffee. You might like their Big Truck coffee. That's their darker roast. That's good. And in Hoquiam, there's, I can't think of the name of it. There's one, Hoquiam is right across the river from another town called Aberdeen. It's literally like across the street, one side of the street you're in Hoquiam, one side of the street you're in Aberdeen. So it's the same town. And for the life of me, I'm drawing a complete blank as to what that place is called, but there's a really nice little coffee shop in Aberdeen. I'll send that to you offline. Mm-hmm. And the Olympic Park, not a lot of great options there for you. In Leavenworth, J5. Is it J5 or J9? I always forget. I'm almost positive it's J5. I'm doing this on live here. Perfect. I am a fan of J5, and that's probably going to be fairly close to where you are in town. So there's some coffee shops for you.
We will certainly need it. We'll be on the road for about a month with two kids.
Coming up here to Washington, you will find an abundance of really good coffee. You'll find an abundance of good food too. Excellent. Depending on what Bellingham's a great town. If you have a day off to spend in Bellingham, I recommend you enjoy Bellingham.
I think we did protect some time. I think we pushed an event back a bit so we could explore.
It's beautiful up there. Yeah, take a look at it. Leavenworth is great too. You'll enjoy that. You don't look like you have a lot of free time there. It looks like you're going over the mountain and coming back. But you will find, and Leavenworth is a Bavarian themed town. So it's very touristy, very, very touristy. But J5 coffee is super solid. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you both for doing this. I wish you continued success with this. I think it's a really cool concept and really cool. The book, I only have volume 2. Your publicist sent it to me. It's a beautiful book. I should first off, people, this is a beautiful book. You guys, the layout of it's great. The art is wonderful. Very cohesive throughout. I really can't recommend it enough. And I think what you're doing to help give a voice to other authors and curating this is very cool. And so kudos to you for, taking a leap.
Thank you.
So anyway, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this or give you the last word. Where can people find you online?
So our website is campfirestoriesbook.com. Mm-hmm. You can purchase our books and card decks there or from Mountaineers Books directly. Yeah. We're also available on, Amazon and some of the big Barnes and Noble giants, but always support your local bookstores, independent stores. Definitely
check out Seattle's own Mountaineers Books for if you're looking to acquire the book. Yeah.
Okay. So are you on social? Do you do much in the social channels?
When we find the time, I do some Instagramming. I'm gonna have to figure out this new threads.
Oh, that's right.
I'm sure that we will be on social, especially during our book tour, sharing some views and event updates on the road.
Oh yeah, we got a little support from Hip Camp, and we're gonna get to stay in some cool places throughout Washington.
Oh, cool.
Through Hip Camp, so we'll be posting about. I think we get to stay on a bus,
A schoolie.
a school. Yeah.
Oh, really? Where are you doing that at?
I think that one's in Olympia.
Mhm.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, so some unique stays along the way.
That's very cool. So you're going to kind of document those a little bit and share those. Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time this morning to sit down with me. And I hope, well, don't take this the wrong way. I hope I can't come to the Leavenworth thing, because that means the Apple Sox are in the playoffs and we have a game. So that would be awesome. But if that's not the case, or the game's an away game and I can be there, I'll meet you and I'll come up and say hello in Leavenworth.
That would be lovely.
Well,
We'd love to see you.
But we'd love to see you, but I also hope that we don't see you, because for the same reason.
Sports. Go team.
Go team. Go sports ball. All right. Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. Glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.